Welcome to True Blue Designs presents the Inside Perspective. I am your host, Tina Dawson, and I thank you for joining us on tonight. Our guests are clients that have supported us over the years. And as a way to say thank you, we provided a platform for them to tell their life's journey in hopes that you would find the information educational and inspiring. Now, if this is not your first show, please take time out to give us some comments, put a message in comments, and let us know what you think about the show. We do value your feedback. Let us know if you think the information is informative, because we really want the information that is provided to be a resource library for you. Now, we're filming live on on Facebook and YouTube. So please take time out to subscribe to our new YouTube channel and to like and share and let everybody know that we are on the air, spotlighting another awesome client. Tonight's guest is an internationally known security expert with an extensive global presence in public and safety security. Help me give a warm welcome to tonight's guest, Mr. Richard Duncan. Hello, how you doing?
Hi, Tina. How you doing? And I thank you for having me on your show today.
Well, I thank you for saying yes. How's the family?
Oh, the family's doing fine. We're still weathering the weather here, but we're fine.
Yeah. It is cold. I was talking to some people in Texas and Mississippi today, and they're just covered in snow, and some people don't have any electricity, and some people don't have any water. So I told them I considered myself blessed that bad weather hasn't gotten here. So I'll take the cold any day.
Yes, we are blessed today.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. You know, sometimes we know people one-dimensionally. And when I read your bio, I was blown away because I've known you for over 11 years. And I didn't know any of this. I take that back. I knew a little bit, but I did not know the extent of your bio. So if you don't mind, take time out to, tell the audience a little bit about Richard Duncan.
Well, Richard Duncan is from a very small town in Florida, Williston, Florida. It's outside of Gainesville, and the population there is about 3,000 people. I grew up there and went to school there, and then I went to the University of Florida, and I received a Bachelor's of Art degree in Criminal Justice at University of Florida, and also was commissioned in the United States Army there because I had a dual enrollment, both in academics and the Army ROTC program.
Okay.
While at Florida, I also joined the best fraternity around, which is Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, Zeta Kappa chapter. We always call it the world famous Zeta Kappa chapter in Gainesville at the University of Florida. And so when I left there, I went directly into the military and became a military police officer at Fort McClellan, Alabama. Mm-hmm. And I stayed at Fort McClellan, Alabama for a couple of years, and then I moved to New Jersey for a few years, and from New Jersey back to Fort McClellan, and then to Korea and St. Louis, and then also Fort Hood, Texas. During my journey in the military, I held many positions in the military police corps. I commanded a training company at Fort McClellan, and I also served as the deputy provost marshal at 1st Cav Division at Fort Hood, Texas. And then from that position, I became the commander of the confinement facility. It was a 3-year maximum confinement facility that held pretrial and post-trial prisoners, military prisoners. And once they served their time, normally they were discharged from the military from that. From Fort Hood, I went to Korea and spent 2 years in Korea. That was an opportunity that my family was also allowed to journey with me. Mm-hmm. So they had an opportunity to experience the life of Korea, and we enjoyed that assignment. Following that, I went to St. Louis, Missouri, and at St. Louis, I joined Kappa Sigma chapter, which is also a great chapter there in the southwestern region of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. I received orders from there to go to Saudi Arabia for Desert Storm. So I served a term in Saudi Arabia, Desert Storm. And I had a unique assignment there because I had responsibility there for planning for the Enemy Prisoner of War program. This is the first time the U.S. had a large number of captive persons, prisoner of war there since the Vietnam War. And the responsibilities of coordinating and supporting that operation was on me as part of the Third Army. When I left there, I returned back to St. Louis and we moved to Fort Hood, Texas, as I stated before. And from Fort Hood, that brought me to Atlanta. And so I came to Atlanta in 1994 in the military, served 1 year, and retired in 95. And from that retirement, I went to the airport to work at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. And I started out there as a security supervisor and went through the ranks and became the assistant general manager for public safety and security.
Wow.
In that role of public safety and security, I had responsibility for the oversight for law enforcement, fire support, safety, security, emergency management, and communication. So primarily all of the operational side of support the operation, the public police, the fire, security, and safety people reported to me. And I had about 600 people under my direction with it. And I did 23 years at the airport and retired there in 2019. So I've been retired now for about 18 months and working as RL Duncan Consulting.
Yeah. Well, that is awesome. You've had an extensive background. You have an extensive background in safety. You mentioned that you were stationed at Fort Hood a couple of times, and we got one thing in common because my son is currently stationed at Fort Hood. So he was at Fort Wainwright in Alaska, and then he went to Fort Hood in November, and now it's snowing, so he's not happy.
Well, when I was at Fort Hood, I think we received snow once. It doesn't snow that often.
Right.
But it's very disruptive when it does happen.
Yeah, and it's very disruptive now. Now you mentioned that you are a member of the greatest fraternity on earth. So let's talk about you being a member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, because I do know that while being a member of Phi Beta Sigma, you have held quite a few positions in the organization. So can we just take a minute to discuss your journey to the organization and what does it mean to you?
Well, my journey to Phi Beta Sigma, it means a lot because myself, coming from a very small country town, going into the University of Florida, and one class had the population of my entire high school. When I started taking my basic classes, the labs and so forth with that. And so meeting the brothers of Phi Beta Sigma was a great thing for me because it allowed me an opportunity to adjust to college environment. And those guys, although I was not a member at that time, had not even said I was going to become a member, but they took me in and they showed me the ropes and provided assistance to me. And as they were doing for all the other incoming freshmen during that fall year semester. And so we went through the fall as friends. And then all of a sudden they invited me to become a member of the fraternity. And for some reason during that spring semester, spring of 1975, they were no longer my friends.
That's a good one.
But they brought me through the process in the spring of 1975. And from that time on, I've served the fraternity with it. Even in college, I was the highest position I held there was the vice president of my chapter. And going into the military, sometimes it's really difficult for military members to maintain their relationship with their organization, fraternity or sorority with it. But I was able to do so. Sometimes I became a member at large, which means I didn't belong to a chapter, but I still belong to the national headquarters with that. When I got to St. Louis, I was the opportunity to join up with a chapter. And at that time, I served as the social action director for a short period of time with it. And at Fort Hood, Texas, I became in fact, I restarted that chapter there. The chapter was dormant when I arrived there because everybody was just returning from Desert Storm.
Right.
And so the brothers came back together, and I became the president of the chapter and served as the president of that chapter. And then I became the first vice president of the state of Texas. So I served in the state capacity there. When I moved to Georgia, again, joining a new chapter, Lambda Sigma chapter, and going through the process of proving yourself all over again with that, I eventually became the chapter president of Lambda Sigma chapter. And I served in most of the roles in the state of Georgia, to include the state director, and then moved to the regional level. And I served as the first vice regional director. On an international level, the national headquarters, I've served as the military liaison for 4 years for the fraternity. And currently I'm serving as the life member president. We have an organization that the life members are there, and I was elected as the president of life members. And so I've served that for almost 2 years now as the president of life members for Phi Beta Sigma.
Wow. Yeah. And your leadership from the military just transferred right into the organization, your leadership skills. Yep.
That's a plus and a minus sometimes.
So you also mentioned that you had served as military police officer while in the military. Can you talk a little bit about some of your positions and duties?
Yes, I was a commissioned officer, which means that I started off as a platoon leader. A platoon leader has about 30 people that they are responsible for within a small unit for that. And so within that, the duties that I had at that time when I first went in, I primarily was in a combat support unit, which means that we train to support the tactical units in the field. So we would have field requirements of going out and do practice exercise with that. And then when I was inside of what we call a garrison, basically the civilian side of the post, I served as the watch officer, which meaning the law enforcement aspects of the installation, especially on the weekends when you had a lot of soldiers off and going downtown for things. So we had to coordinate with the local police to ensure that the soldiers were not creating too many problems for them. Right. And we basically returned those to the units if in fact somebody did get into some issues while off duty with that. And so we provided the law enforcement support for that installation. Perhaps my most rewarding time was when I was in Saudi Arabia, and I served as the chief of the enemy prisoner of war. And I say that was the most rewarding time because it gave me an opportunity to not only work with the military, the U.S. military units, but also work with the French and the English units, and then also the Saudi Arabia, the Red Cross, the International Red Cross, because the International Red Cross had responsibility of ensuring that we provided humane treatment to the prisoners. And so the things that people would not think about, such as ensuring that they have the proper clothing, ensuring that they have food, ensuring that they're maintained in a humane way while being under our care. And so I had the responsibility of gathering information and reporting that back to headquarters of the Army from on a weekly basis as to where we were with it. So I think that's the one which was the most rewarding, because when I stepped into that job, I was given a folder and said, this is what your job is. And there was not too many pieces of paper inside that folder.
So you had to figure it out.
So we had to figure it out. And as we went along the process, it just sort of figured itself out, because even now it's 30 years since Desert Storm. And this time of the year, 30 years ago, it was an Air Force war. The Air Force was doing its thing, and then the ground war started in March, and it lasted only 3 days. But At that time, at the end of that period of time, we had about 80,000 people under our care with it. And so we had to work with the host country to return those prisoners to the host country so that they could eventually be returned to their own country after the agreements were made with that. So, and that is really probably the most rewarding part of my military career. But I think in addition to that, just working with people and training junior officers, training other individuals on their roles and responsibility, and then providing that leadership for the team. And so I see myself as having contributed to the development of a lot of people during my tour.
Yeah, and that training and development of people transfer right into your role at Hartsville Atlanta Airport. So let's talk about a little bit about that. You were the assistant general manager of public and safety security, public safety and security at the airport. And I know in your bio you said that it was a lot of different positions that you held. Can you talk a little bit about those positions again and give us some examples of some of the things that you had to take care of?
Yes, and it's really Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport. In case somebody from Hartsfield.
That's wrong. Hartsfield, let me get it right. Hartsfield Jackson
Yes.
Atlanta International Airport. Is there an acronym?
Yes, Hartsfield Jackson or or the ATL. But we always say Hartsfield Jackson because it's really the airport is named after two great men.
Yeah.
Hartsfield, which was the initial mayor when the airport was created many years ago, and of course Maynard Jackson, the mayor doing the redevelopment of the airport. So those two names really make up Hartsfield Jackson. And your question again, please.
Oh, it was you. I was saying that if you could tell us a little bit about tell us some more about the positions that you've held and give us some examples of some of the things that you had to take care of while you were at the airport.
Okay. A little piece that I really don't talk too much about, the position I held is very critical, was when I first left the military, I went to work for a contractor, a security contractor that had responsibility for the security checkpoint. And they provided the screening for passengers that passed through the airport. Of course, I did that work for about 6 months. And I was one of the managers at this checkpoint for it. And then, of course, after 9/11, that contract went away and the TSA was formed to take over that responsibility. So the TSA came about after 9/11 with it. But prior to that, it was a contract security company that had that responsibility. And so that was my initial job. And then I saw an announcement of a job with the city of Atlanta. So I applied for that job and I was hired for it. But the job I was hired for was not the job I went to work in.
How often does that happen?
Well, the advertisement was for a supervisor of the control center. And during the process of applying for the job, being hired for the job, that job went away. And so I became the assistant manager for the security division, primarily working with the badging operations, which is the credentialing, background checks, and then, of course, the security of the airport. From that role, I transitioned into the assistant manager's position. And then when the manager of the security, he retired, and then I became the manager, and that position was upgraded to a director's position. So that's why I say I was the director of the security division. With that, we had the responsibility of implementing all of the security procedures that are required for an airport to operate under the Transportation Security Administrations. And so that included the access control, which is the physical access into the airport, both the front side where the passengers see and the back side that most passengers are not familiar with. But the access controlled, the pass and lock and ID system, those are the things that I had responsibility for. And of course, we had a team that was working with that. From the security director's position, I became the assistant general manager for public safety and security. At that time, public safety and security, as I said here previously, it had some responsibility for overseeing the law enforcement and the fire. Both the Atlanta Police Department provides a unit at the airport that works with the airport, and that unit commander, he has responsibility of reporting, of course, to the chief of police, but he also has responsibility reporting to the assistant general manager for public safety and security. And we worked on their budgets, and the day-to-day activities went through the airport, whereas their tactical and technical responsibilities went to the chief of police. And so we had to have that, he had that dual reporting responsibility with it. And so that is one of the critical things as an airport, most people don't realize that the City of Atlanta Police and the City of Atlanta Fire Department have units at the airport that has responsibility reporting to the airport general manager and also to their respective chiefs with it. So you work on coordinating activities with it as opposed to saying you're commanding that individual to do something, because you have another commander that really is directing his day-to-day activities with it. Within the Department of Aviation, there's the Security Division and Communication Emergency Management and Safety. Now, those individuals work directly for the general manager of the airport, the owner operator of the airport with it. And again, security, as I described before for myself, the communications group, they are the ones that provide the 911 services for the airport. When you come through the airport and you dial 911 on your cell phone, then it's most likely you're going to go into the airport 911 system as opposed to the City of Atlanta or the City of Hateville. But around the airport, you have several different cities there. And sometimes you may end up at the Hateville, but they will reroute you to the airport for that. And those individuals operate the 911 center and they dispatch fire, police, and other units with that. Our safety group had the responsibility of ensuring the implementation of the safety requirements, both life safety, aircraft safety, and the safety of the facilities with it. And so slips, falls, those were our biggest concerns with it within the terminal building for that, because that can lead to a lawsuit if in fact that happens with it. And so that's basically what it is for there. In my most challenging moment working at the airport was 9/11.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so September 11th, 2001, that day, everybody remembers what they were doing. And I remember what I was doing there. I was going through some paperwork and I received a phone call from my supervisor and he said, "Turn on your TV." And so I turned my TV on and I saw the planes going into the tower. And at that point, we assembled the command group together and started planning what are we going to do with that, and started receiving a lot of directions as to how the airport was going to operate. And so the first task that we had to do was to close the airport. And of course, all of the aircraft landed at the nearest airport to them. So we had a lot of aircraft that came in that were not scheduled to come into Atlanta's airport for that day. We stayed closed for 3 days, implemented all the security measures that were necessary for us to reopen. And then we invited guests back to the airport on the third day with it. But that period of time changed everything. It also changed you, because now you go through the Transportation Security Administration's checkpoint as opposed to an airport contracted checkpoint.
Right.
And so the whole Homeland Security process, that agency stood up after 9/11.
So let me ask you this. So TSA is not a contracted agency?
No, TSA, those are federal employees.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
And, right. They're part of the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay. So they're federal employees. Okay.
Yeah.
You learn something new every day. Yeah, because my neighbor across the street actually is a supervisor with TSA. And I just thought that they were contracted. They were a contracted agency contracted in to provide that service, but they're part of Homeland Security.
Yes. They're part of Homeland Security.
Learn something new every day. Well, that was awesome. And yeah, you're right. You know, everybody knows, can think back to what they were doing in 9/11. And 2001, I think I was pregnant with my daughter at the time, at home watching it and just in awe, couldn't believe, what I was seeing. And it was just a travesty. Yeah. So in your bio, you also said that you were named Security Director of the Year for Security Magazine, Solutions for Enterprise Security Leaders, named you the 25 most influential security executives. Let's talk a little bit about those two awards that you received.
Yes, and the first award, the Security Director of the Year, that came about, I think about 2004 timeframe with it, and 2004, 2005 timeframe. And it was really a culmination of all the work that we had put in in transitioning the airport from pre 9/11 to post 9/11, and the things that we established at Hartsfield Jackson for managing security, and then going through the process of the inspections that had taken place in that time frame. And one of my supervisors recommended me for that award, Jan Lennon, and she wrote up the recommendation and submitted it to the magazine that was hosting that particular award, and they selected me as the award recipient for that year with it. But it really was a culmination of all the work that had gone into transition Hartsfield Jackson into the security program that we had at that time with it, and I think that's really what really led to that. And the other award for us being one of the 25 most influential security executives, that award again was one in which was a competition or a recommendation was made for me to be there, and I had some real stiff competition for that. And the people that were selected for that, the 25, a lot of those guys had positions that were way above me. And I wondered, about myself and the role that I was taking. But I was looked upon at that time as an international person that was doing the things that were necessary for that. And I also at that time was serving on a committee, which is the Airport Council International North America Public Safety and Security Committee. And so that gave me an opportunity to have a national scene on providing guidance and development of policies and procedures that would affect the airport operations. And we always took a very far-reach look upon things, because some of the things that we were debating at those meetings would not come into effect for another 3 to 5 years.
Right.
But we had to have the vision as to what would be necessary in order for us to function in the out time. And it takes that long for a rule or law to be put into effect that's going to affect such an industry as the aviation industry. So we helped develop policies and procedures that eventually the Transportation Security Administration would implement or direct airports or airlines to implement with that. And so that's really where the international and the national experience came from. And once I served in that position, I went to the World Committee, which is, again, it's an Airport Council International World Committee. And that consisted of about 25 people from around the world. And so most of the major airports internationally had members on that committee. And at that time, we were working with policies and procedures that dealt with the International Aviation, Civil Aviation Organization, which is stationed in Montreal. So you're looking at what would be necessary for the entire world to have a safe and secure air operations system in place with that, and the connectivity between the different airports, because you can get on a plane in Atlanta and 17 hours later, you're halfway around the world.
Right.
And so you have to have one system in place to ensure that the safety of aircraft coming into the United States and those that are leaving the United States. And of course, if you're traveling around the world, you want to have some type of safety, some idea that those airports are operating in the same type of system as the airport that you left.
Right. And you were a part of all of that. That is awesome. So in 2019, you retired from the airport and you started RL Duncan Consulting.
Yes.
With all your years of experience, and you started a company for yourself.
Yes, I did. And really, it's one of those deals where you think about it all the time. And so even before I retired, I was thinking, what would I do for that? And I felt at that time that I had some additional service available within me, and I wanted to continue to share my experiences and my expertise with other people. Yeah. And so that's why I chose to go into the consultant world for that aspect of it. And then it also would allow me to continue to do something as opposed to retiring and staying home all day. So it was both of providing a service and then continuing to function in a professional manner with it. And I thought that was the best way to do so with it. And I initially started out with the training focus.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a contract, on-call contract with the company to provide training for airports. But then there's something called COVID that came along that basically shut down a lot of the training
Yeah.
opportunities. And now those companies are migrating away from face-to-face training
Right.
into the virtual arena for training and delivery of training, receiving training with it. So having to retool to a virtual environment. And I'm also working with some companies on providing development of policies, development of programs that can be implemented at airports and other locations with that. And with working with those groups of individuals, I can work here from my desk.
Yeah.
And my partner is in Virginia. I have a coworker in Chicago, have a coworker in San Francisco, and then I have another coworker here in Atlanta and one in North Carolina. So we meet on Zoom to do our work with it. But that's one of the pleasures of doing the consulting work, is that you don't really have to be physically there for that. Now, I'm looking for the day that I'll be able to get back out there and interact with people again, face to face, but that may be a while before it happens.
Yeah, me too. It's something about being able to hug and touch and do that face-to-face communication versus, always being virtual. So yeah, I'm looking forward towards the opportunity where I can travel again too. Yep. So when you started your company, you actually came to us and asked us to work on a project to create some company apparel for you. And you actually have on one of the shirts that we designed. So can you talk about a little bit about the importance of branding? Why was that project important to you?
Well, branding is always important because the brand itself will be there when you walk out the door with it. And so you want to be able to have people to quickly recall who they were talking to, and then being able to have a visual as to what they have seen with it. So I did ask you to create a shirt for me and a hat behind me there. So I wanted to display your work, just to say that I'm appreciative of the work that you did for me. And for as the title, the name of my company, of course, it's no real secret that RL Duncan is me. But I am my brand.
That's right.
That's one of the things that I have always said, is that you represent yourself. And so people will evaluate your worth based on who they see and what activities that you have done for them or to them with it. And so I see my company as me, and I am RL Duncan Consulting.
Well, thank you so much for allowing us, or for entrusting us with that project. Your first startup company, and I know it meant a lot to you. So I just thank you for coming to us and allowing us to help you with that project.
Yes, and if you notice, I chose the right colors too.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. No secret. Also in your bio, it stated that you were DBE certified. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of that certification?
Yes, Disadvantaged Business Enterprises is a Department of Transportation program, and that program is designed to allow individuals an opportunity to compete for projects and works with it. Within the DBE program, it has to be at least 51% owned by a disadvantaged person. The person can be disadvantaged either socially or economically with it. And normally you would find women programs qualify for it, African American, Hispanic, Asian Pacific, Native Americans, and others qualify for it. But the key thing is it's an opportunity for the business to work with other companies and to do projects that are funded either by the Department of Transportation or other governmental entities for that. And the key thing is to look at helping those businesses to develop and be competitive. Myself, as a sole proprietor provider of services, I don't have the resources to support me to do all the things that's necessary. The payroll resources and a lot of the administrative resources will come from that primary company, the prime company. In order to become DBE certified, you have to go through a lot of work. It's about a 4-month process of submitting information to the evaluator. For me, it was the Georgia Department of Transportation is the certifying agency for me. Within Georgia, you could either be certified by the Georgia Department of Transportation or even MODER provides certification for select cities, and you would have to look into the guidelines as to which agency you apply to. But they look at the business size, they look at your personal net worth and the net worth of your company, and there's some targets there as to how much money you personally can have in order to qualify, and then also the gross receipts of your company in order to stay within the organization. You go through an interview process with one of their agents, and then they visit your office to ensure that you have an office with it. And so COVID was one of those virtual visits with it. And so we had a virtual interview, and then she asked me to point my camera around my office so that she could see the walls of my office.
Really?
Because they couldn't make visits because of the COVID restriction that was in there, but during the interview process with it. And then eventually I received my certifications for it. And what that has done for me since being certified is that some projects require a percentage of participation, is what they refer to it. And so by having that certification, my hours would go into that pot of qualifying that company to bid on that particular project, because there's a certain percentage that they would have to have within the DBE program with it. So that's basically what it is. If you were interested in more information on the DBE, I would just suggest you Google it, and then you would either find the Department of Transportation guidelines on how to become a DBE, or you can also contact the Georgia Department of Transportation. They have information on their website also about the program. So I don't want to get into detail with it because I may give some bad information. So I was giving you the references to where you go to get that type of information, as opposed to trying to guess exactly what's written in there on their website.
All right. So you go to the Department of Transportation.
The U.S. Department of Transportation, and then for people who are in the state of Georgia, the Georgia Department of Transportation also has a good program or explanation, because they're one of the certified agencies. Okay.
Well, as you have talked about being in the military, working in the airport, you worked a lot on teams and you have created teams. So my question is, what is the key to developing a good team?
I think the number one key to developing a good team is having trust. Trust in yourself, and then also trust in the individuals that are working with you, and then having an open lines of communications with the individuals so that they can provide some feedback to you as you provide feedback to them. Because many times within a team, the person that's in charge of the team may not have the best solution for that issue that's before you. And so you have to be receptive to input from the team members as to how it should be done with that, and taking their input and their recommendations. And you want to be able to provide honest, constructive advice to the team members to help them grow and develop. Because the key thing is that for me, it's always looking at a team member and saying that at some point, I would like for you to be able to do what I'm doing with it. And so, for instance, one of my team members from the airport, Jan Lennon, we hired her many years ago, and seemed like every time I got a promotion, she got a promotion. Because she always backfilled me. She backfilled me as the director, and now she's the assistant general manager for public safety security. And so knowing that you have someone on your team that can fulfill your role at any time is always very helpful to do so. And then you should be trying to develop individuals so that they can replace you on the team, because no one is going to be on the team forever.
That's right.
And you want to be able to have ingrained in the people that are working with you how things would be done. And of course, when that person assumes responsibility for the team, it's going to be done their way anyway.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
And so you have to trust that they will continue to do the things that's necessary, because the environment that they're working in may be a different environment than the one that you love.
That's true. That's true. And at least you know that I've always said is that their foundation, you know, you trained them right, right? So as they build upon that, that's on them. But you know that their foundation was good because you trained them.
Yes, and I have several people out there in the field, Jan and I, we always keep a list of the people that work with us that are doing things at the same level that we're doing things at. And so I have several individuals that came up through the system with me that are doing director jobs and even assistant general manager jobs at other airports. So one of the things that we always hard upon is that we want to train you to be the best person that you can be.
Right.
And then when you feel that you're fully trained and you want to move on, we support you leaving.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. But I think, Richard, I think that in order for you to really implement that you have to know who you are, right? And I think that you have to have a heart for that, because, we know that we've all ran into people who, wouldn't try to help develop you, right? And wouldn't want you to go above them. But I think that says a lot about you as a person and as a leader, that you can train and mold and shape people to get the best out of them, and then be happy for them when they fly.
Yes.
I think that is so important. I think, you have to know who you are. And I think you have to have a heart for that, in order to not keep people down. You know how sometimes they say the crab in the barrel mentality, I think we will go further as people if we thought of things like that, and we changed our mindsets to say, hey, if I know something, let me share what I know, right? And if that can help that person become better, then so be it, instead of, hoarding or keeping that information to yourself.
Well, the job is always too big for one person to deal with. Right. And so if you spread it out, it'd be less headaches for you.
That's true. That's so true. I hope somebody got that. So what can you discuss with us? What is some of your short and long-term goals for your company?
Well, I thought about that question when I saw it, as far as short and long-term goals. It's always difficult to formulate what your goals are with it. And then, of course, we put them down on paper for that. And short-term goals, I'm into this now, been into it for 18 months. Mm-hmm. And my initial goal was to establish the company and make contacts and then go to work in those areas. Of course, the environment changed on me with that. So I'm at this point now reestablishing myself with it. I still maintain my contacts that I had previously with it, and I'm still looking at expanding and doing more projects. Mm-hmm. But as a sole person working in my company, I'm always going to be working with someone else.
Right.
With it, unless I decide to expand and start managing a large group of individuals to work for me or with me with it. So I don't really see that as a long-term, as a in the horizon for us going to that, because 5 years from now, probably I will probably retire.
You said 5 years?
I'm giving myself about that time, and then I'm going to really start retirement with it. So I look at myself as, for long-term, 3 to 5 years. It's probably long-term for me, considering my age and how long I've worked in the environment with it, because I'm over 40 years of working at this point with it. So I see myself as continuing to do the things that I have been doing, working with other teams to produce products for our clients. Mm-hmm. And that is really where my long-term goals is. Financially, I don't really have a financial goal as to how much money I want to make during that period of time, because I also would like to at some point get back into traveling and increase my personal travel aspect of it, as opposed to continuing to travel only for work.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add into my personal goals after this COVID process over is to include some additional revisiting some of the places that we have gone to before, but on a personal basis, and as opposed to going there just to work.
Yeah, there's a difference. I've traveled through the southeastern region or the southern region, and it's a difference. When you're working, you really can't get out to explore the city or the town, and so you can say you were there, but that's about it. You haven't seen anything. So yeah, when COVID is over, I hope to increase my personal travel also. If you're just now joining us, we are interviewing Richard Duncan with RL Duncan Consulting. He is an internationally known security expert. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments, and we will make sure that we ask your question before the end of the show. Let's see what we can talk about. This is a good one. Has there ever been a time where your ethics were tested? If so, give us an example.
Well, in my field, your ethics is tested every day.
Right.
And that's no joke. Because you working in safety and security, safety is a little bit easier to deal with because there's more technical specifications as to what is right and what is wrong within safety. And then, of course, everybody wants to be safe. And they will want to also participate in safety programs. Security is a little bit different because security is more how people feel about things as opposed to understanding why things must be done the way they're done. So if you make people feel that they're safe and that they're secure, then they're more happier with that. And then there's always a group of individuals that, regardless of what the policies and procedures are, they would like to find a shortcut to get around doing those things. And so I think the most times that your ethics are challenged is when you're dealing with an individual who feels that they know the process, but it doesn't apply to me.
Right.
Type of situation with it. And so getting those individuals to understand that they also must comply with it for their own safety is one of the critical aspects of it. Now, as far as ethical situations, I think when you deal with ethics, you have to make sure that you are doing the things that you're supposed to do when no one else is watching. And it goes along with integrity and maintain your integrity, because you cannot regain your integrity if you start compromising those integrities. Because if you do something to allow someone to do something that they shouldn't be doing, then once they have completed, they would tell their buddy what happened. And at that point, you're either allowing their buddy to do the same thing, or you're saying, no, they can't do it. And then that individual will begin to try to hold things over your head with it. Right. So I always try to maintain my integrity and doing the things that should be done with it. Now, of course, there are some boundaries and there's some give and take in situations, because there are ways to get things done legally, technically, and safely. That's not necessarily the way it's written in the guidebook. And just understand what the guidebooks say, but don't allow anyone to cause you to compromise your own integrity when trying to support and assist them, because as soon as they have gotten what they need, they forget about the process that you have done at that time to assist them.
There's one question that came in from Robert Eason. He said, talk about your involvement with the International Security Organization and your travel with that organization. Were you not president of that organization at one time?
And thank you, Robert, for that question. And yes, yes, I served as president of the Airport Council International World Security Committee. And we did travel about every 6 months. We would have a meeting at some location with it. Some of the meetings, I've even hosted a meeting in Atlanta, but that's the organization where I said that we work on the international rules for security and implementing the processes for that applies to all airports within the world with it. So as the president of that organization, I served for 2 years as president of the organization. And so I had the responsibility there of working with the staff, because they always provide a staff person to serve as the secretary of the committee to ensure that we would stay on track with things with it. And then working some of the other airports that you would be familiar with, the Amsterdam airport, the Heathrow, the airport in London, the airport in Australia, the airport in Hong Kong, the one in Korea. Those were the primary participants. And then, of course, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, they had a representative on this committee with it. And each airport would get an opportunity to host a meeting. It usually was a 2-day meeting where we would go in with an agenda, discuss those agendas, and complete the tasks that associate with it. And then the host would also give you tours of those locations. So you had an opportunity to look at those airports and compare those airports against your own airport. So it was almost like a benchmarking type of activity with it, for knowing what's in the regulation and then comparing that to how you do things and then how another country would do things, because North America has its set of rules, Europe has its set of rules, Asia has a set of rules, but they all must fall up under the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is a body of the United Nations that specify the rules and regulations that applies to all airports, regardless of the location.
So you visited quite a few airports. Name one airport that when you viewed it, you were just wowed.
Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport.
Really? Do we have the top of the line airport?
Actually, and I say this, and I would like people to do this. When you leave Atlanta Airport, or actually when you come back to Atlanta Airport, and you look at that airport and you say, and then compare it to the airport you just left, you will see what a gem you have with this particular airport. It is the world's busiest airport and the most efficient airport. World's busiest, the last count I saw was 110 million passengers with it. And so if you look on Concourse A, on a busy day before COVID, you have more people on one concourse than you have at another airport.
Wow.
And so you have about 5 concourses there, 6 with the international concourse with it. And for as beauty, airports in Asia was always considered great airports because they have more of the newer airports with it within Asia, and they always have a lot of people that work within those airports. So the beauty of those airports in Asia, those were some of the things there. And then Amsterdam was probably one of the most technology developed airports, because they were always on the front end of testing new technology at that particular airport. But if you go to the airport and look at it and see exactly what it is there, but there are a lot of great airports in the world, but none greater than ours.
You're biased. Faye asks, do you think the recent insurrection in DC has placed the United States at an increased security threat from international threat risk, long or short term?
I think the insurrection at DC, it was more of a domestic threat with it. And of course, there are always security threats out there that people are prepared to deal with. But for the situation in DC, that was more of a domestic threat. And I will allow whoever is going to do the study of that particular incident to really come up with what caused that insurrection and then what some of the vulnerabilities that were associated with it. But I really believe that it would not affect us from an international perspective, because those were mostly domestic terrorists as opposed to having an international flavor with it. And from a short-term process, it's going to probably change some of the ways that the Capitol building is secured. You may see additional physical security there. Again, when you add a lot of physical security, then it cuts down on the access from some of the persons who are not going to cause any harm with it. And then there will be quite a bit of behind-the-scene things that are changed with security with it. But from an international perspective, I don't think it really is going to create that much of an international situation for us. But we do have to get control of our domestic terrorism and address some of the domestic issues that we have not dealt with before.
Yeah, that was horrible. On January 6th. I just watched it with my mouth I just couldn't. I was in awe. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it was happening. But I want to ask you this question too. I saw on the news, probably was at the end of the year, where they had an influx of homeless people sleeping in the airport. And, they had it on the news and some of the passengers were talking about it. Can you talk a little bit about, as far as safety is concerned, how do you handle that when you have, because the only way they get there really, I think, is the main way is from the train that comes in, the monorail system. But how do you handle that?
Well, you're right. The model system is the main way of transport between the airport and Central City, Atlanta, with it. And so at night, when those trains come in, there are individuals that don't have a shelter to go to, and they see the airport as a comfortable place that they will receive shelter. It has food available, and so people without homes feel safe at the airport. Of course, the airport is not designed to take care of individuals without a home. The airport is really designed as a transit location to transfer you from a ground transportation vehicle to an air transportation vehicle. And so just having those individuals inside of the public area of the terminal, it can present a safety issue, but most time those individuals do not create a safety problem for the passengers. Now, of course, when individuals see individuals like that, they think the worst. But those are people like you and I. It's just that they are challenged with not having the resources to provide a shelter over themselves with it. So what we did with the individuals without a house was that we provided assistance to them by providing a team that would actually interdict them and offer them transportation to a shelter or to other facilities. And then they also would do follow-up with those individuals to see if they can get them into some type of housing situation with it. So the airport took a very positive role with dealing with the homeless individuals by offering ways that they can provide means for themselves with it, and then coordinate with the agencies. The city of Atlanta, they have agencies available to help coordinate activities and programs for the homeless persons, and the airport would get those individuals in there. The biggest challenge, though, is on a night like tonight. Very cold outside, and the airport is a warm, inviting facility for it. And we don't want that to happen, but it's just one of the things that human nature says, that people are going to seek shelter where they feel safe and comfortable.
Right. Yeah. And when you see things like this reported on the news, without knowing that the airport has a process in place, you would just think that the homeless person comes in on the train, they're at the airport, people start complaining, the police are called, they're arrested, and that's what you would think. But it's good to know that there is a process in place at the airport to deal with that type of situation. So that's good to know.
Yes. And the individuals that are arrested, they have committed some other activity.
Okay.
Because the intent is to move them to another location with it. But if in fact they commit a crime, then of course the police will handle them as they would handle anyone else that break the laws of it. But the intent is not to call the police to arrest individuals, but to assist those individuals with finding another location for shelter.
Okay. Yeah. See, that's good to know. You can't always what's the word? I'm stumped for the word, but the news, you can't always believe what you see on the news, right? Because there's always something else going on. You can't take the news for face value, and then you can't read a lot into it, right? Because like you said, there's things that goes on behind the scenes, and they just show, what they want to show. So
Right, and that is true with it. And so the news media, they show what it's visible to them, and
Right,
then the behind the scenes things may not necessarily be newsworthy.
right, right. To them, newsworthy to them. Well, Richard, thank you so much for allowing me to interview you. It was a great conversation. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope they were inspired and educated. Richard's information is at the bottom. And also, this interview will be housed on Facebook and on YouTube. So please use it as a resource. Richard, you hold on. Everybody, we will see you next Wednesday. Same time, same station. Good night.
Thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.